She risked her life for his son, and the Mafia boss fell for the one woman he couldn't protect. Before we dive into the story, tell me where in the world you're watching from, and if this story steals your heart, please hit subscribe. The monitor's steady rhythm was the only sound Naomi heart permitted in the pediatric recovery room, a fragile barrier against the controlled chaos outside. Her focus was absolute, centered on the small boy swimming in the oversized hospital bed. 6-year-old Luca Voss was pale beneath his mop of dark hair, his hand limp in hers, but his vitals were solid. She had spent the last hour meticulously titrating his medication, her gaze flicking between his face and the readouts, her every action precise. The accident that brought him here, a multi-car collision downtown, had felt wrong from the start. The EMTs had been too quiet, the police presence too heavy, and the other vehicle's occupants hadn't even been brought to this hospital. Naomi, however, was a nurse. She did not ask about the circumstances, she only treated the patient. And this patient, this small, shy boy with a dinosaur applique on his pajamas, was finally stabilizing after surgery. She let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding, her shoulders aching from the tension. It was only then that she noticed the silence in the hallway. The usual squeak of sneakers and the rattle of carts had ceased, replaced by a heavy, expectant quiet. The door to the private room opened not with a knock, but with a sound so soft it was more a change in air pressure. A man stepped inside, and the atmosphere in the room immediately chilled, the sterile warmth sucked into the vacuum he created. He was tall, his shoulders straining the fine charcoal wool of a suit that cost more than her car. His ash-dark hair was impeccably styled, his beard close-trimmed, but it was his eyes that captured her. They were gray, flat, and utterly unreadable, and they were fixed not on his son, but on her. Another man, built like a reinforced wall, flanked him at the door, his gaze sweeping the room before settling just outside. The first man, Adrian Voss, walked to the bedside, his presence so overpowering that Naomi instinctively took a step back, her hand leaving Luca's. He gently brushed his knuckles over his son's hair, a flicker of something human passing through his cold gaze, before he turned his full attention back to Naomi. His voice was a low rumble, devoid of the panic she usually heard from parents. "Report." Naomi bristled at the command, her exhaustion momentarily forgotten. She was not his employee. "Your son is stable," she said, her voice crisp, professional. "Dr. Ramirez repaired a fractured femur and addressed the internal bruising. He's responding well to the pain medication and his vitals are strong. He's very lucky." Adrian Voss looked at her, truly looked at her, and she felt pinned, analyzed, and dismissed in a single second. "I do not believe in luck, nurse. I believe in competence." "You were the one who stabilized him in the emergency room, correct?" Naomi nodded curtly, disliking the way he said competence, as if it were a commodity he was assessing. "I did. I'm Naomi Hart, his primary nurse." He gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod. "My chief of security, Milo, is outside. He found this on the undercarriage of the ambulance that brought my son here." He held up a small plastic bag. Inside was a small black disc. The collision was not an accident. It was an attempt, and this hospital is now compromised. A cold dread, sharper than her professional detachment, settled over Naomi. She looked from the disc to the sleeping boy. This was not a custody dispute. This was something dark, something that belonged in the rain-slicked shadows of the harbor, not in the pastel-painted pediatric wing. "What does that mean?" she asked, though she already knew. "It means," Adrian said, stepping closer, "that we are leaving and you are coming with us." Naomi's head snapped up, her hazel eyes flashing. "Absolutely not. I have other patients. I have a life. I cannot be kidnapped by you, Mr. Voss. Luca is safe here. I'll have security posted." Adrian cut her off, not by raising his voice, but by lowering it. "You think hospital security can stop the men who would do this? They followed him here. They watched him be brought in. And they watched you," he paused, his gray eyes sweeping over her, "save his life. They already know your face, Nurse Hart. They know you are the one tending to him." He let that sink in, the implication wrapping around her throat. "I am not asking you to protect me. I am telling you that my son needs continued observation, and he is clearly attached to you. You will come to my home, where you will both be secure. You will continue your job, and you will be compensated beyond reason. This is not a negotiation." Naomi's entire being rebelled. She was a woman of principle, of ethics. She saved children. She did not cater to the whims of dangerous, powerful men who lived in a world of violence. "No," she said, her voice shaking slightly but firm. "I won't. I'll report this. You can't just take me." Adrian almost smiled. It was the most terrifying expression she had ever seen. "Report it to whom? The police commissioner who is on my payroll. The hospital administrator who leases this building from my real estate division. You are a principled woman, Naomi. I can see it. It is your defining quality, so let me appeal to that principle. You took an oath to your patient. Your patient is my son. He is in mortal danger in this building. If you stay, you are abandoning him to that danger. If you come, you save his life. Again. He had her trapped. He knew it. He had presented her with an impossible choice where her own principles were the bars of her cage. To refuse was to abandon Luca. She looked at the boy's face, his shy smile still visible even in sleep, his dinosaur backpack resting on the chair beside the bed. She hated Adrian Voss. She hated his power, his cold logic, and the dark, violent world he represented, but she could not leave the child. "For Luca," she said, her voice tight. "Only for Luca. And I am not your prisoner, I am his nurse." Adrian Voss nodded, turning toward the door as if the outcome had never been in doubt. "Milo will arrange a sterile transport, gather his medication. We leave in 5 minutes." The penthouse was less a home and more a fortress disguised as a masterpiece of modern architecture. Located atop the Voss International headquarters, a sleek glass tower that pierced the harbor skyline, it was a world of cold concrete, polished steel, and soft amber lighting. Floor-to-ceiling windows wrapped around the entire living space, offering a breathtaking, panoramic view of the city and the bay. But the glass was thick, reinforced, and strangely soundproof. It felt to Naomi like the most expensive isolation tank in the world. She had been here for 3 days, and the unreality of it was still settling on her. Her life had been bifurcated. The before, with her small apartment, her long shifts, and her simple silver pendant from her mom. And the after, this gilded cage where men in dark suits murmured into earpieces, and the only person she truly spoke to was a 6-year-old boy. Luca, thankfully, was thriving away from the hospital. He was a quiet child, but his shyness quickly melted around Naomi. He was now ambulatory, his small leg in a bright blue cast, and he followed her around the vast, sterile space, his dinosaur backpack firmly strapped on, carrying his favorite books. Naomi had established her boundaries immediately. She was given a suite of rooms that were larger than her entire apartment, but she spent most of her time in the common area or Luca's room. She was Luca's nurse, and that was all. She ignored Adrian Voss as much as she could, which was difficult, as he was an oppressive, constant presence. He didn't hover, but he was always there in the periphery, taking a call by the window, his back to the room but his attention clearly divided, or sitting in a severe armchair reading a financial report, his gray eyes lifting to watch her whenever she and Luca played a game on the floor. Their interactions were clipped, functional. How is he? His pain is minimal. He's healing perfectly. Does he need anything? He asked for crayons, the ones with the sharpener. Adrian would nod, and an hour later, Milo would appear with an art store's entire inventory of crayons. Clash came on the 4th evening. Luca was asleep, and Naomi was cleaning up the remnants of a drawing session when Adrian entered the main living area. He had shed his suit jacket, and the white shirt he wore was rolled up at the revealing a long, jagged scar on his left forearm. It was old, pale against his skin, but clearly from a knife. He poured a glass of water, his back to her. "You disapprove of me," he stated. It was not a question. Naomi paused, her hand full of broken crayons. "I disapprove of this," she said, gesturing to the windows, the silent guards, the life his son was being forced to lead. "This isn't protection, it's a cage. He's a child. He needs sunlight and other children, not this." Adrian turned slowly, his unreadable eyes settling on her. "And what do you know of protection, Naomi? You live in a world where you believe in rules and consequences. You believe that if you are good, you are safe. That is a luxury. My son does not have that luxury. I am protecting him from a world that you pretend does not exist." "A world you created," she shot back, her temper finally snapping. "A world where men try to kill children in collisions. That is your world, Mr. Voss, not mine, and you dragged us both into it." He walked toward her, and she refused to step back, forcing herself to meet his gaze. He was so tall, his shadow falling over her. "I did," he said, his voice dangerously soft. "And I will do whatever it takes to keep him safe. You see this place as a cage." I see it as the only place on earth he is truly untouchable. He was too close, and she could smell the faint, clean scent of expensive soap and something metallic like steel. You think you are better than me, you with your gentle hands and your silver pendant, but we are both protectors, Naomi. The only difference is the scale. Just then, his phone vibrated on the counter. He glanced at it, and his entire demeanor shifted. The controlled power became something sharper, colder. He answered, turning away from her. Report. He listened, his body rigid. No, liquidate the asset. I want Sokolov's shipping lanes choked by morning. I do not care what the cost is, I want him to feel this. He was the chief executive officer discussing logistics. But Naomi knew with chilling certainty that liquidate and choked were not business metaphors. He was the Mafia boss, and he was waging a war. Hung up and the silence stretched, Naomi found she was breathing heavily. She saw the man who was tender with his son, the man who discussed billion-dollar acquisitions, and the man who calmly ordered the destruction of another. The complexity of him was terrifying. She retreated to the kitchen island, needing the solid quartz barrier between them. He watched her, his expression thoughtful. He asked about your pendant, Adrian said, his voice back to its low rumble. Luca. He said it was your magic charm. Naomi's hand instinctively went to the small, worn silver leaf at her throat. It was my mother's, she said quietly. She was a nurse, too. She said it was to remind her that even in sterile places, things can grow. Adrian considered this, his gaze fixed on the delicate piece of metal. She was strong, he surmised. You have her strength. He took a step toward the island and then another. He stopped just opposite her. You are not like the people in my world, Naomi. You do not fear me. You defy me, and yet you are the only person I have ever trusted with my son. He lifted his hand slowly, as if not to startle her. He did not touch her, but his fingers hovered just over the pendant, not quite touching her skin, but close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from him. The air crackled, thick with unspoken, dangerous things. He wanted to touch her. She wanted, in some terrifying, primal way, to let him. Then, breaking the spell, his fingers brushed her collarbone as he pulled his hand back, clenching it into a fist at his side. Get some rest, nurse. Tomorrow will be a long day. The illusion of safety, even in the steel and glass fortress, shattered the next day. The outside world did not just knock, it kicked the door in. Naomi was reading a dinosaur book to Luca when Milo entered, his usually stoic face grim. He didn't speak, just handed Adrian a tablet. Adrian scanned the screen, his face becoming a mask of controlled fury, the scar on his forearm standing out as his muscles tensed. He looked at Naomi, and his expression was something she had never seen before, guilt. Milo, he said, his voice a blade. Take Luca to his room, institute lockdown, no one in or out. Luca, sensing the sudden adult tension, whimpered and clung to Naomi. It's okay, sweetie, she murmured, her heart beginning to pound. Milo is going to show you the new coloring set. I'll be right there. She handed him off, her hands shaking slightly, and turned to Adrian as soon as the door closed. What is it? What happened? He turned the tablet to face her. It was a live feed from a security camera, time-stamped 5 minutes prior. The image was of her apartment door, splintered and hanging off its hinges. Then the feed switched to the interior. Her small, neat home had been systematically destroyed. Her sofa was slashed, her books thrown, her few possessions crushed. It was not a robbery, it was a violation, a message. They knew where you lived, Adrian said, his voice flat, dead. Sokolov. He bypassed my surveillance. He wanted to show me he could get to you. Naomi stared, numb. They had gone through her things, her history. On the floor, in the center of her ruined living room, was the one thing she had left behind, a framed photo of her and her mother. The glass was shattered, and the photo itself was torn in half. A sound, half sob, half gasp, tore from her throat. This was her life, her mother's memory. This was the one place that was hers, and he had let this happen. All his power, all his control, and it meant nothing. This is your fault, she whispered, the words trembling. Then the numbness gave way to a cold, sharp rage. This is all your fault, you and your disgusting world. You promised I would be safe. You said he couldn't. You. She was packing, her hands clenched, her body vibrating with fury and violation. She grabbed a heavy glass paperweight from Adrian's desk and in a fit of helpless anger hurled it at the window. It bounced off the reinforced glass with a dull, pathetic thud and shattered on the floor. He broke my mother's picture. She finally choked out, sinking onto the cold concrete floor, her anger dissolving into raw grief. She had been so strong for so long, and now she was broken. She put her head in her hands, ignoring the sharp sting as a piece of glass dug into her palm. She felt rather than saw Adrian move. He knelt in front of her, heedless of the glass shards. He didn't speak. He simply took her right hand, the one that was bleeding, and examined the cut. His touch was surprisingly gentle, his thumb brushing away the blood. He pulled a handkerchief from his pocket and carefully, precisely, wrapped it around her palm. "I know," he said, his voice rough. "I know, and I am sorry." The apology shocked her more than the violence. He pulled her to her feet and steered her into his own austere bathroom, sitting her on the marble vanity. He retrieved a first aid kit and began to clean the small wound, his large, scarred hands moving with the same precision she used on her patients. He was quiet, his focus entirely on her. The silence was thick, filled with her shaky breaths and the quiet clink of the tweezers as he removed a tiny glass splinter. "He did this to provoke me," Adrian said finally, not looking up from her hand. "He targets what his enemies value. He watched you with Luca at the hospital. He has been watching this building. He thinks you are my weakness." Naomi's head snapped up, her tear-filled hazel eyes meeting his gray ones. The proximity was overwhelming. She could see the faint lines at the corners of his eyes, the absolute stillness of his control. "Am I?" She whispered, the question hanging in the air, loaded with 1,000 implications. She was no longer his prisoner, no longer just his son's nurse. She was the target, she was the leverage. Adrian stopped his work, his gaze holding hers. He didn't answer. He didn't have to. His silence was a confession. He slowly, deliberately placed a bandage over the cut, his fingers lingering on her skin. He was the cause of her pain, and in that moment the only person in the world who understood it. He leaned in and she knew she should pull away, she should slap him, she should run. This was the man who had ruined her life, but she didn't move. She was trapped in the intensity of his gaze and the dangerous, magnetic pull of his power. He was not just the monster, he was the protector. He was the storm and the shelter. His hand moved from her palm to her jaw, his calloused thumb stroking her cheek, wiping away a stray tear. "He cannot have you," he murmured, more to himself than to her. And then he kissed her. It was not a gentle kiss. It was not soft or romantic. It was raw, desperate, and possessive. It was a brand, a claim. It tasted of control and fury and a deep, aching guilt. It was the kiss of a man who ruled an empire but was terrified of losing the one thing he couldn't conquer. And to her own profound shock, after a moment of frozen terror, she kissed him back, her hands gripping his shirt, surrendering to the impossible gravity of the man who had destroyed her world and simultaneously become the center of it. The morning after the kiss was a new kind of prison. The tension in the penthouse was no longer a simple clash of wills. It was a taut, vibrating wire of unspoken confessions. Naomi avoided Adrian, throwing herself into a frantic routine of care for Luca, her movements brisk, her voice clinically cheerful for the boy's sake. But she was achingly aware of him. She felt his gaze follow her as she helped Luca build a block tower, and when his hand brushed hers as he passed her a cup of coffee, the jolt was so intense she nearly dropped it. They had crossed a line, and in doing so, had bound themselves together in a way that was far more permanent than any employment contract or threat. She was no longer just the nurse in his protection. She was a part of his war, the part he had failed to keep separate, the part that had breached his legendary control. He, in turn, was colder, more dangerous than she had ever seen him, spending hours on the phone in his office, his voice a low, lethal monotone as he systematically tore Dmitry Sokolov's world apart. The fragile, volatile truce was broken by a delivery. It was not Milo who brought it, but a courier in a generic uniform who had somehow passed through the building's layers of security, claiming to have a medical delivery for Luca Voss. The man was gone before security realized the breach. Milo brought the sterile, black box to Adrian, his face pale. It was not medical equipment. Adrian placed it on the kitchen island, his body rigid. He looked at Naomi, a silent order. "Luca, go to your room and put on your headphones. I want you to listen to the dinosaur story as loud as you can." Luca, sensing the fear in the room, didn't argue. He just grabbed Naomi's hand. "You'll come soon?" "I promise," she said, her voice strained. As soon as his door was shut, she turned back to Adrian. He opened the box. Inside, on a bed of black satin, was a single, perfect, dead white lily. The symbolism was sickeningly clear. Purity, death, it was addressed to her. He got into the building, Naomi stated, her voice hollow. All your men, all your fortress, and he just walked in. Adrian swept the box off the counter in a sudden, violent motion. It crashed against the far wall. He didn't get in, Adrian snarled, his control snapping, the mask of the calm CEO replaced by the fury of the Mafia boss. He was let in. He has someone on the inside. He wanted to prove that my walls mean nothing, that he can touch you. He was packing a caged predator. He thinks this will break me. He thinks it will make me sloppy. He's right. That admission stopped Naomi cold. He was admitting a weakness. He was admitting that she was his weakness. He stopped in front of her, grabbing her arms. His grip was just short of painful, his gray eyes burning into hers. He will not stop. He will not stop until he takes one of you. First, he showed me he could get to your past, he said, his voice rough, referencing her apartment. Now he has shown me he can get to your present. I will not give him a chance to get to your future. He was going to end it. Tonight. Sokolov wants a truce, he said, his voice dropping as he regained his composure, the plan already forming. He sent a message. He wants to meet the old waterfront warehouse district, the Foggy Pier. He wants to negotiate his shipping lanes back. It's a trap, Naomi whispered, her blood running cold. Of course it's a trap, Adrian replied, a grim smile touching his lips. He thinks I'm desperate. He thinks I'm afraid. He's right about the first part. Naomi's mind was racing. She was a nurse. She saved lives. This man was planning to take one. And she was terrified not for herself but for him. She saw Luca happily listening to stories, oblivious to the fact that his father was walking into a probable execution. Don't go, she pleaded, grabbing the front of his shirt the same way she had when he kissed her. Adrian, please, he's trying to kill you. Just, let's run, take Luca and just disappear. He covered her hands with his own. He would hunt us. He would never stop. There is no running from this. There is only finishing it. I have spent my entire life building an empire that could withstand any attack. I will not let him dismantle it. I will not let him take my son. Naomi looked into his relentless, stormy eyes and saw the truth. He was a king, and this was a challenge to his throne. But she saw the man beneath it, too. Then do not do this for revenge, she said, her voice fierce. Do not do this for your pride or your empire. Do this so Lucas still has a father. Come back. The words hit him. He saw the genuine, desperate plea in her eyes. She was not afraid of him. She was afraid for him. He gave her a sharp, definitive nod. I will. He then gave her a choice, the only one he truly could. Milo can take you and Luca now to a private airfield. By morning, you will have a new name, a new life in a place so remote Sokolov will never find you. You will be safe, permanently. He was offering her an out, the escape she had wanted from the very beginning. Naomi looked toward Luca's room. She thought of her ruined apartment, of the dead Lily. She thought of the safe, simple life she had lost. And then she looked at Adrian, the complex, dangerous man who had kissed her with desperate possession. To leave was to be safe, but to leave was to run, and it was to leave him. I'm not leaving him, she said, her voice shaking but resolute. And I'm not leaving you. We're not running. We're waiting for you. A flicker of profound, unguarded emotion passed over Adrian's face. He pulled a small, sleek burner phone from his desk drawer and pressed it into her hand. If I am not back by midnight, you are to call the only number in this phone. You will say the word Haven. Milo's team will extract you and Luca. You will not ask questions. You will not wait for me. Do you understand, Naomi? She nodded, her throat tight. He pulled her close, his hand wrapping around the back of her neck, and kissed her. This kiss was different. It was not the angry, possessive brand of before. It was a promise, a vow, and a farewell all in one. Be ready, he whispered against her lips. Then he was gone, the penthouse door sliding shut behind him, leaving Naomi alone in the silent, gilded cage, clutching a phone that represented the end of the world. The waterfront warehouse district was a skeleton of the city's industry, its cobblestone streets slick with rain and shrouded in a thick harbor fog. Sodium lamps cast sickly yellow pools of light, illuminating nothing. It was the perfect place for ghosts and ambushes. Adrian Voss, flanked by Milo, walked onto the designated pier, his black cashmere coat flapping in the damp wind. He appeared calm, a man walking to a business meeting, but every sense was heightened, his hand resting casually in the pocket that held his weapon. Dmitry Sokolov was waiting at the end of the pier, backed by 4 of his own men. He was a large man, bundled in furs, a smug smile on his face. Adrian, he boomed, his voice echoing over the water. So glad you could see reason. I knew you were a practical man. A few shipping lanes are a small price to pay for your pretty little nurse, yes. Let's get this over with, Dmitri, Adrian said, his voice flat, projecting boredom. You made your point. You're a child who likes breaking other people's toys. What are your terms? Sokolov laughed, a harsh, barking sound. My terms are simple. I want it all. Your routes, your distribution, your contracts with the city. You will dismantle your own empire and hand it to me. And in return, he sneered, I will let your son's nurse live. Perhaps. I have a sniper on your building right now, Adrian. He has a direct line of sight to your pretty glass cage. One word from me and she is gone. Adrian stood still, letting the threat hang in the air. The fog swirled around them. You think this is my only vulnerability, Adrian said, his voice dangerously quiet. You think you cornered me. You think you're a strategist, but you're just a thug. You target weakness because you have no strength. Sokolov's smile faded. You are in no position to, Adrian cut him off. You put a tracker on an ambulance, you ransacked an innocent woman's apartment, you sent a dead flower, you think you're waging a war, but you're just writing a bad play. Adrian looked at his watch. And your timing is terrible. What are you talking about? Sokolov snarled, signaling his men to raise their weapons. I'm talking about logistics, Adrian said, the CEO merging with the boss. While you were planning this little drama, setting up your single sniper, I was retasking my entire logistics network. While we've been standing here, my teams have been executing seizures on every warehouse, every front company, and every bank account you control. You wanted my shipping lanes. As of 5 minutes ago, you don't even have a rowboat. You're ruined, Dmitri. Sokolov's face went white with rage as his phone began to buzz frantically. He ignored it. You're lying! Kill him! The knight exploded. But the first shot didn't come from Sokolov's men. It came from the shadows, from Adrian's own hidden teams. Milo moved with brutal efficiency, and a close-quarters fight erupted on the damp wood of the pier. It was not cinematic. It was ugly, desperate, and fast. Adrian moved directly for Sokolov, ignoring the chaos. This was not about his empire. This was for Naomi, for Luca. This was the elimination of a threat. Sokolov, enraged, pulled his own weapon, but Adrian was faster, closing the distance, using the other man's bulk against him. A shot went wild, and Adrian felt a searing pain as a bullet grazed his shoulder, but he didn't falter. He slammed Sokolov against a pylon, and the fight was over in a series of short, brutal movements. It ended with a sickening finality, and Sokolov slid to the pier, his eyes wide with an uncomprehending stare. Silence fell, broken only by the sound of the foghorn and Milo calmly checking his weapon. It's done, sir. The network is secure. Sokolov's infrastructure is gone. Adrian pressed his hand to his bleeding shoulder, the adrenaline fading, replaced by a deep, cold exhaustion. Let's go home. Naomi was packing, the burner phone slick in her sweating palm. It was 11:52 p.m., 8 minutes to midnight, 8 minutes until she had to make the call that would shatter her life and Luca's. The penthouse door hissed open. She spun, her heart leaping into her throat. Adrian stood there, his black coat soaked, his face pale, and his left arm dark with blood. He was alive. He was back. She ran to him, crashing into his chest, her hands fisting in his coat. She didn't care about the blood, the violence, the man he was. She only cared that he was breathing. He wrapped his good arm around her, holding her so tightly she could barely breathe, his face buried in her soft, dark curls. It's over, he murmured, his voice rough. It's finished. She pulled back, her nurse's training kicking in as she saw the extent of the blood. You're hurt. It's nothing, he started to say, but she was already steering him to the sofa. Sit, take off the coat. She ran for the first aid kit, the same one he had used on her. Her hands were steady, her voice calm and authoritative as she cut away his shirt. This is going to sting. He watched her, his gray eyes losing their coldness, replaced by a raw, unguarded warmth. She was magnificent. She was fearless, not flinching from his wound, her touch gentle but firm as she cleaned the graze. She wasn't just his son's nurse. She wasn't his captive. She was his partner. Months later, the city was the same, but the empire had changed. Adrian Voss was still a powerful man, his name still synonymous with control, but the whispers of his other life had faded. He had divested from the gray areas, liquidated the assets of his darker enterprises, and poured his resources into legitimate logistics, real estate, and private security. He was still a CEO, still ruthless in the boardroom, but the war was over. The penthouse was sold. He and Luca now lived in a house, one with a garden, thick walls, and a state-of-the-art security system that was purely defensive. Final, and most significant of his private donations had funded the opening of the Heart Pediatric Clinic, a sun-bright building of white stone and olive trees, providing free care to the city's most vulnerable. Naomi stood in the courtyard, wearing a simple cream sweater and jeans, her silver pendant resting against her collarbone. She watched Luca, now 7, his cast long gone, chasing a butterfly near a fountain. He was laughing, a bright, normal sound. A car door closed, and she looked up. Adrian was walking toward her, not in a suit but in a simple linen shirt, the sleeves rolled up, revealing the old scar and the new one on his shoulder. He looked like a normal man almost. He came to her, sliding his arms around her waist, and kissed her. It was a kiss of deep, earned peace, a kiss that held no desperation or control, only affection. "How was your day?" she asked, smiling against his lips. "Quiet," he replied, and for him it was the most beautiful word in the world. "Everything is quiet." He looked over her shoulder at his son, then back to the woman who had risked her life for him, the one woman he couldn't protect, the one woman who had, in the end, saved him.